Chief doctor shamefully fired black nurse for saving a homeless man's life. She saved a life and lost her job, but what no one knew was that the man she saved would come back to save her, heart and all. They didn't know the man is a billionaire. He comes back for the nurse and they both fall in love. Lena Harris had always known she was meant to help people. Even as a little girl, she'd patch up scraped knees with band-aids and a serious expression, convinced that kindness was the closest thing to magic. So, when she finally became a nurse, nobody was surprised, except maybe Lena herself. She had worked hard, studied harder, and graduated top of her class from a nursing program where most people twice her age dropped out halfway through. She wasn't the kind of nurse who just followed charts and filled out paperwork. Lena felt things. She noticed the little tremble in a patient's hand when they were scared. She knew when a person needed more than medicine, when they needed someone to sit beside them for just 2 quiet minutes and say, "I see you. You matter." Her co-workers admired her at first, young, driven, and unshakably kind. But in a world that ran on speed and structure, Lena's softness sometimes came off as naive. They said she cared too much, that she'd burn out, that one day she'd help the wrong person. They didn't know how right they were. It was a gray Wednesday morning at Westbridge Medical Center, the kind where nothing felt quite awake yet. Lena had already pulled 12 hours and was running on vending machine coffee and pure adrenaline. She was finishing up notes when the ER doors burst open. A man, filthy, unconscious, was wheeled in by 2 paramedics. They said he collapsed near a gas station on 5th. No ID, no family, just a pulse slipping away. The attending physician took one look and sighed. Overdose. Again. Probably fentanyl. Another nurse muttered, "He'll be back in a week, if he makes it." Nobody moved, but Lena did. She didn't ask permission. She just acted. Gloved hands, steady breath. Naloxone, oxygen, chest compressions. She fought for this man like she would for her own brother. And slowly, painfully, he came back. His eyes didn't open, but his heart did. Someone behind her scoffed. Why even bother? Lena ignored it. She wasn't looking for applause. She only knew that a man had died, and now he was alive. And that mattered. It wasn't until later that the fallout began. First, a phone call from the hospital administrator. Then a formal meeting. Cold voices, legal phrases, words like protocol violation, unauthorized intervention, and safety risk. They said the man she saved had a record. Multiple arrests, suspected gang ties. He wasn't someone they wanted brought back into the world. She stared at them, stunned. So, because he's homeless, because he's poor, that makes him less human. They didn't answer. The next day, she was suspended, then fired. Her name, once respected, became a whisper no one wanted to say out loud. Nurses who'd eaten lunch with her last week avoided eye contact in the grocery store. Her landlord called about noise complaints that never happened. Even her church sent her an awkward email. Perhaps it's best if you take some time for yourself. Lena had saved a life, and in doing so, she lost her own. She walked home that night under a sky that felt too quiet. The streets were cold. Her hands were colder. She kept thinking, was it wrong? Would she do it again? The answer came without hesitation. Yes. 100 times, yes. But still, she was alone. Have you ever done the right thing and been punished for it? Maybe you stood up for someone, told the truth when it cost you something, or showed kindness when others turned away. And instead of being thanked, you were blamed. If that's ever happened to you, tell your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if this story already has you thinking, if you believe in standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, subscribe. Lena's journey is far from over. And the next part? That's where everything changes. Lena Harris didn't come from much. Her world began in a weather-worn neighborhood on the edge of Cleveland, a place where the sirens sang louder than the birds, and the cracks in the sidewalks told stories no one had time to fix. Her mother, Jolene, worked double shifts at a nursing home and still found time to braid Lena's hair in the morning. Her father, when he was around, mostly left behind the scent of stale beer and broken promises. But Lena grew up with more than people realized. She had grit. She had faith. And above all, she had her mother's heart, a heart that believed in serving others, even when no one served you. Every day after school, Lena would sit at the back of the nursing home cafeteria, coloring in her workbooks while Jolene spoon-fed patients who no longer remembered their own names. That's where she first saw what care looked like. Not the medical kind anyone could give a pill or change a bedpan, but the human kind. Her mother remembered every patient's story, every birthday, every odd request for applesauce and gospel radio. And the way the patients' faces lit up when she entered? Lena never forgot it. When she was 12, her best friend's brother overdosed. No one came in time. The paramedics arrived too late, and even then, they moved like they'd seen it 100 times and cared less each time. Lena stood on the porch and watched them load the stretcher. Her friend, barely holding herself together, whispered, "I don't think they even tried." That night, Lena made up her mind. She would become a nurse, not one who clocked in and checked boxes, but one who tried, even when the world gave up, especially then. But dreams are expensive when you grow up poor. Lena worked part-time jobs from the age of 15, waitressing, tutoring, cleaning houses with her aunt on weekends. Every dollar went into a mason jar marked nursing school. People laughed when she said it out loud. "You'll never make it," they said. "You'll burn out." But Lena just smiled and kept saving. In high school, she joined every volunteer program she could find: food banks, health drives, blood donation campaigns. Not for college applications, not for praise. Just because she believed that every act of care, no matter how small, stitched the world back together a little at a time. She got accepted into a state university with a partial scholarship and made up the rest with student loans and side gigs. Studied late into the night, eating ramen, eyes barely staying open. But she kept going. The fire inside her didn't waver. Every anatomy diagram, every clinical rotation, every exhausted moment brought her one step closer to doing what she was meant to do. Lena never chased prestige. She didn't want to work in a high-rise hospital with a marble lobby. She wanted to serve communities that felt forgotten, people like the ones she grew up around, the single moms, the exhausted grandmothers, the teens no one believed in. The homeless man who sat outside the bus station and always tipped his invisible hat to her when she passed. That's who she became a nurse for. And when she finally graduated, when she stood on that stage in her crisp white coat with tears in her eyes and her mother cheering louder than anyone else in the crowd, it wasn't just a diploma she received, it was a vow to never look away, to never become the kind of nurse who gave up on people, to never forget that every person, regardless of their story, their scars, or their struggle, deserved to be fought for. At Westbridge Medical, she became known as the Heart. Patients remembered her name long after they left. She kept a small notebook in her pocket where she'd write down things they said, names of pets, what flavor of Jell-O they hated, what scared them most about their surgery. Little things that helped her see them not as cases, but as people. Her co-workers didn't always understand. Some rolled their eyes when she spent extra time with patients who didn't have visitors. Others whispered that she was trying too hard. But Lena didn't care. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, and she swore she'd never let someone feel that way on her watch. This was Lena's world before everything turned upside down. A world of long hours and aching feet, yes, but also of small victories and silent prayers answered. She wasn't rich, she wasn't powerful, but she was making a difference, and that was enough, until the day it suddenly wasn't, until the day she did what she'd always done, saved a life, and found herself punished for believing that every life was worth saving. He was wheeled in just after midnight, barefoot, trembling, his skin grayed from the cold, the sunken grooves of his face etched deep with exhaustion. The paramedics barely said a word as they handed off the chart. Unidentified male, found collapsed behind the gas station on 9th, probably homeless, vitals unstable, severe dehydration, possible infection. That was all. To most of the night shift, it was just another sad case, the kind that came in, got stabilized, then quietly disappeared with a pair of donated socks and a granola bar. But not to Lena. She glanced at him, gaunt, eyes flickering open for seconds at a time, and something inside her locked in place. There was something in his face, not recognition, just a weight. A sense that he wasn't just tired, he was giving up, and she couldn't let that happen. Not on her watch. "Name?" she asked gently, kneeling beside the gurney. The man didn't answer. She squeezed his hand. "You're going to be okay, all right? I'm Nurse Lena. We're going to take care of you." He blinked, and for a fraction of a second, she thought he tried to smile. Dr. Sutton walked in then, skimming the chart. Older, stiff-collared, with a perpetual scowl carved between his brows. "Just keep him hydrated and sedated. Triage priority C. No ID, no insurance. Don't overcomplicate it." Lena frowned. "His vitals are dropping. He's not just tired, he's septic." Dr. Sutton didn't even glance at the man. "He's a transient. We'll stabilize him, but don't waste time. There are 4 other patients in the ER who actually need our attention." "Every patient needs attention," Lena said, her voice steady but firm. "I'm ordering a blood panel and starting IV antibiotics." "You don't make calls like that," Sutton snapped, snatching the chart from her. "You're a nurse. Do what's in your scope." But Lena had already wheeled the man into an open bay. She set the IV, ran the labs herself, and called a resident on rotation for a second opinion. She knew she was towing the line, but this wasn't about ego, it was about time. And something told her if they waited, this man would die. The labs came back fast. His white blood cell count was through the roof. Full-blown sepsis. She didn't even wait, called for vasopressors, oxygen, and a stat culture. She worked fast, hands moving on muscle memory, whispering reassurance to a man who couldn't even hold his eyes open. By morning, his fever had broken. He was stable, breathing on his own. And Lena, exhausted, still in her scrubs from the night before, was summoned to Dr. Sutton's office. He didn't sit, just stood there, arms crossed, voice low and cold. "You overstepped. You ignored my orders. You used hospital resources on a patient who likely can't pay for them." She didn't flinch. "I saved a life. You gambled hospital liability for a nobody." "No one is a nobody," she said, "and if I had followed protocol, he would have died." Sutton stared at her like she was a naive child. "We don't get gold stars for martyrdom, Nurse Harris. This isn't a charity. It's a business. And if you can't accept that, maybe you're in the wrong profession." She left that office with her heart pounding and her hands shaking, not from fear, but from something colder. Something that told her the system she had believed in, trained in, sacrificed for, might not share the same values she held sacred. That evening she sat by the man's bedside. He was awake now, barely. His voice was raspy when he whispered, "Thank you." "You're welcome," Lena said quietly. "Do you remember your name?" There was a long pause, then, almost reluctantly, Carlton Moore. No ID, no next of kin, no home address. The name didn't ring any bells. Yet. Lena didn't know it then, but This moment, this quiet interaction, would ripple into something far beyond what she imagined, something that would change her life and challenge everything she thought she knew about justice. But for now, she was just relieved he was alive. She didn't tell anyone that she stayed after her shift, that she snuck in broth from the nurse's break room and sat with him while he dozed, that she adjusted his blankets when the overnight staff forgot him. All she knew was she couldn't shake the feeling that this man, this quiet, forgotten soul, mattered. Not just in the abstract way she believed every human mattered, but in a very real, very personal way. There was something about Carlton Moore that didn't add up. Something hidden beneath the grime and the weakness. Something no one had noticed yet. But they would. She had saved his life. And in doing so, she had unknowingly stepped into a story far bigger than either of them. If you were in Lena's shoes, would you have gone against orders to save a life? What would you have done differently? Let me know in the comments below. It happened on a Thursday. A cold, brittle morning where the wind stung against the hospital windows and the world outside seemed distant, irrelevant compared to what Lena Harris was about to face. She was called in for a meeting. No context, no time to prepare. Just a brisk message from administration, followed by a white envelope already waiting for her on the desk. Dr. Sutton didn't even look up as she walked in. Beside him sat a woman from HR, neatly dressed, clipboard balanced on her lap, expression frozen somewhere between apology and neutrality. Lena sat, her gut already sinking. "We reviewed your conduct during the incident with the unidentified patient," Sutton began, tone clinical. "You made several unauthorized decisions, violated triage protocol, and misused hospital resources on a case that was clearly not emergent by administrative standards." Lena stared at him. He was in septic shock. "You are not a physician," Sutton snapped. "You do not have the authority to override treatment priorities." "I saved his life." The HR rep shifted. "Ms. Harris, this isn't a debate. Your employment is being terminated effective immediately." It didn't sink in at first. Lena blinked, lips parted, the words hanging in the air like static. "Wait, you're firing me." "You left your assigned patients, ignored physician oversight, and opened this hospital to potential liability," Sutton said, folding his hands like a judge handing down a sentence. "This is not a personal decision. It's procedural." "But She shook her head, unable to steady her voice. "I've never had a complaint. I've never missed a shift. I train new hires. I've been here 5 years. You know who I am." He didn't flinch. "That will be all." The folder slid toward her across the desk. Her hands didn't move. They were shaking. She left with her badge deactivated and her locker already emptied by security. No exit interview, no thank you. Just silence and the heavy press of betrayal. Outside the hospital, Lena stood frozen on the curb, winter wind slicing through her coat. Her fingers clenched the paper envelope like it could hold her together. It didn't. They fired her for saving a life. But that wasn't the whole truth. Not really. This had been building for years, and she had felt it. Every sideways comment, every instance she was passed over for promotions that went to less experienced nurses who looked nothing like her. The way she had to work twice as hard to be seen as competent, while others were called promising for far less. It came in whispers, in skipped opportunities, in Dr. Sutton correcting her in front of patients for things she hadn't done wrong. In meetings where her ideas were ignored, only to be praised when repeated by someone else. In the way she was called aggressive when she spoke with conviction, or too emotional when she advocated for patients who weren't privately insured. It had always been there, and now they had their reason. She made it easy for them. She stepped out of line. She dared to act with humanity, and they punished her for it. She didn't cry. Not at first. She sat in her car, parked at the edge of the hospital lot, her scrubs still pressed from the night before, staring at the paper like maybe she'd misread it. Her heart thundered in her chest. Her throat ached. She wanted to scream. She wanted to drive back, march into Sutton's office, throw every commendation she'd ever earned onto his desk, and ask him, why? But she didn't, because she already knew. They never saw her as equal. To them she had been a nurse with a ceiling, useful, not valuable, dedicated but not indispensable. And when she stepped past the boundaries of that invisible line, when she chose to matter, they cut her loose without a second thought. Lena spent that night on the couch in her small apartment, still in scrubs, holding a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Her phone buzzed with messages from co-workers who'd just heard, all offering variations of sorry and you didn't deserve this. But no one spoke up. No one confronted Sutton, because they knew, too. She could have disappeared into that silence, could have folded into the shame, the anger, the deep sense of being erased. But something in her held firm. Carlton Moore had lived. That mattered. The system didn't want to admit it, but she knew. The choices she made had value, even if no one else acknowledged it. And beneath her grief, beneath the rising tide of humiliation and fury, something else began to take root. Resolve. Lena didn't have a job anymore, but she still had her voice, her principles, her story, and that story was far from over. If you were in Lena's position, fired for doing the right thing, what would you have done? Would you fight back or walk away? Share your thoughts below. No one had heard from him in weeks. Carlton Moore vanished from the hospital after his discharge, slipping into the shadows the same way he had arrived, quiet, invisible, forgettable to everyone, except Lena. She was the only one who'd seen him, not as a case number, not as a nuisance, but as a man worth saving. So when he reappeared, it wasn't in a hospital gown or bundled under a blanket in the ER waiting room. It was in a tailored charcoal suit, stepping onto a national news broadcast. The headlines exploded within hours. Carlton Moore, tech billionaire disguised as homeless man, speaks out after nurses firing. There he stood behind a podium, clean-shaven, upright, clear-eyed. The same man Lena had held steady on a stretcher, now commanding the world's attention. "My name is Carlton Moore," he said, voice calm but resonant. "Years ago, I lost my wife and daughter in a plane crash. The grief nearly destroyed me. I disappeared, not into addiction, not into death, but into a different kind of escape. I wanted to understand pain. Real pain. The kind the world turns away from." He paused. Cameras clicked. Reporters held their breath. "I lived on the streets by choice, and I saw how society treats people when it believes they have no value. I was spit on, ignored, dehumanized. But through all that, one person saw me. One person gave me dignity when I couldn't ask for it. Her name is Lena Harris." The silence that followed was total. Carlton continued, gaze unwavering. "Lena didn't know who I was. She didn't need to. She saw a man in need and made a choice to help, at the cost of her job, her reputation, her livelihood. That's the kind of nurse she is. That's the kind of human being she is." It was a turning point. Within 24 hours, #JusticeForLena trended across social media. Interviews flooded in. Public outrage mounted. Letters poured into the hospital. And then came Carlton's second move, swift, precise, and impossible to ignore. He held a press conference just 2 days later. This time, Lena stood beside him. Her shoulders were tense at first, hands clasped in front of her. But Carlton looked at her with the same calm reverence he had when she'd fought to save his life. And slowly she lifted her chin. "Lena Harris has been offered a position at my private medical institute," he announced. "Not just as a nurse, but as Director of Patient Advocacy, with a 6-figure salary, full benefits, and a research grant in her name." Lena's eyes filled, but she held steady. Carlton wasn't finished. To the administrators who fired her, shame on you. Shame on a system that punishes compassion and rewards arrogance. Shame on Dr. Thomas Sutton, who viewed a dying man as disposable. The statement went viral. Sutton tried to deny, to minimize, but the receipts were already public. Carlton had made sure of it. Emails, internal memos, witness statements, all released. The board of the hospital was forced to act. Dr. Sutton was suspended indefinitely, pending formal review. Public apologies were issued, but the damage was done. And not to Lena, to them. For years she had been fighting silently, bending to the system, trying to outwork bias with grit and grace. And now the truth was undeniable. She wasn't just right, she had been righteous. At her first press interview, a reporter asked how it felt to have someone like Carlton Moore in her corner. Lena paused, then answered with quiet conviction. I didn't help Carlton because I thought he could help me. I didn't know who he was, but I knew he mattered. I believe everyone does. That was all. Simple. Clear. True. She didn't speak as a victim. She didn't gloat in Sutton's downfall. She just stood there, whole, resolute, and finally seen. Carlton, for his part, stayed by her side. He didn't try to be the hero. He let Lena's actions speak. He amplified her, protected her, and ensured that the world knew who she was. Not just a nurse, a warrior for dignity, a woman who, even in a broken system, chose to heal. What do you think of Carlton's decision to help Lena? Was it justice, redemption, or something deeper? How else could he have supported her journey? Let us know in the comments below. At first, Lena kept her distance. Not out of unkindness, she was grateful, deeply so, but because gratitude wasn't love, and admiration wasn't trust, and Carlton, despite his warmth and good intentions, carried an entire world Lena had never lived in. Private jets, silent boardrooms, a bank account bigger than the hospital that fired her. It was too much, too foreign, too other. They worked side by side at his institute, building something neither of them had imagined when they first met. Lena, now director of patient advocacy, pushed for programs that brought street-level care into the center of policy. Carlton, true to his promise, gave her full authority. No micromanaging, no corporate buzzwords, just quiet support and open resources. Late nights turned into early mornings, strategy meetings spilled into shared lunches. And slowly, wordlessly, their dynamic shifted. It started with the little things. The way Carlton listened when Lena talked about her mother's sacrifices, how she cleaned houses at dawn just to pay for Lena's nursing textbooks. How Carlton asked questions, not to be polite, but because he genuinely wanted to understand. The way Lena noticed how Carlton flinched when sirens wailed outside, or how he never quite filled the silence after mentioning his daughter. They were both haunted, both healing. She saw his grief like a hidden fracture, quiet, deep, never quite set. He saw her fire, the kind born from struggle and stubborn hope. And for the first time since the tragedy that splintered his world, Carlton felt something stir in him that wasn't pain. Still, Lena hesitated. "You don't have to give me the world just because I treated you like a human being," she told him one evening after a gala. Her heels dangled off her fingers, her hair coming undone. "I don't want to be your redemption story." Carlton's reply was soft. "You're not. You're my beginning." But beginnings are messy. The media caught wind of their connection before either of them had the courage to name it. Tabloids labeled her the nurse who tamed the billionaire. Online forums speculated whether it was real or calculated. Whispers followed her through the hospital halls. And then there was her own discomfort. Lena had never been comfortable around luxury. She didn't know what to do with a closet full of designer gowns she didn't ask for, or the way Carlton's staff bowed slightly when she entered a room. She didn't want to be kept. She wanted to stand beside him, not behind. Carlton, for his part, struggled with his own guilt. Part of him still wondered if loving again meant betraying the memory of his wife. There were nights he woke up drenched in sweat, convinced he was still homeless, still alone. Lena never judged him for it. She simply brought him water, sat beside him, and let the silence do what words couldn't. Their relationship was forged in the real, not fairy tales, not rescue fantasies, just two people trying to navigate the strange terrain of trust after trauma. Eventually, Lena let her guard down. Not all at once, but in pieces. She invited him to her old neighborhood, introduced him to the corner shop owner who still remembered her by name. Carlton, in turn, brought her to a shelter he'd anonymously funded, showing her where he'd once spent winter nights, unseen. She held his hand, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. They didn't declare their love under fireworks or at a press event. It happened one rainy night after a community clinic meeting, just the two of them sitting in his car parked outside a diner. Lena turned to him and said simply, "I didn't expect this. You and me." Carlton smiled, eyes tender. "Me neither. And yet," she whispered, "and yet, they were here. Not because fate demanded it, but because kindness had lit a spark, because empathy bridged two distant worlds, because sometimes love doesn't roar into your life like thunder. Sometimes it arrives quiet, earned, real. Do you think love can come from unexpected places? Have you ever found love in a difficult situation? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. They never went back to being who they were before. Lena Harris, the quiet nurse who once slipped through hospital corridors unnoticed, now sat on the board of directors at that very institution. Not because she sought power, but because she'd earned it. Not through privilege, but through persistence. Carlton Moore, once invisible by choice, found purpose again. Not in billion-dollar ventures or the echoes of tragedy, but in partnership. With Lena by his side, he funneled his wealth into programs that didn't just treat people, but uplifted them. Mobile clinics, mental health support for the underserved, hiring initiatives that brought in voices long shut out of healthcare conversations. Their love wasn't a spectacle. It was steady. The kind you feel in glances across crowded rooms, in late-night phone calls just to say, "I believe in you." The kind of love built from long days, tough conversations, and unwavering respect. When the hospital changed its policies, it wasn't with grand gestures. It was with Lena's fingerprints on every reform. Bias training became mandatory. A new protocol was implemented to protect whistleblowers. A fund was created in Lena's name to support nurses pursuing community health initiatives. Her story, once whispered in quiet sympathy, became required reading during staff onboarding. Dr. Sutton, meanwhile, quietly resigned under pressure, his legacy replaced with one of cautionary consequence. No smear campaign, no revenge, just accountability. Lena didn't need to destroy anyone to win, she just had to stand firm. And Carlton never tried to save her. He simply reminded the world that she mattered. Together, they proved something most people forget in the noise. That compassion isn't weakness, that empathy isn't naive, that doing the right thing, even when no one is looking, or especially when no one is looking, is the most powerful act of all. Their life now? Full, messy, and beautifully ordinary. They still argued over who made the better coffee. Lena still insisted on grocery shopping herself, no assistance. Carlton still attended grief support groups. They were still healing, still growing, and still loving. Not in a way that erased the past, but in a way that honored it. Because Lena never forgot where she came from, and Carlton never forgot who reminded him of who he was. Their story wasn't just about a nurse saving a man. It was about what happens when kindness disrupts injustice, about how love doesn't rescue, it recognizes. and how courage, when paired with compassion, doesn't just heal hearts, it changes systems. Lena's story shows the power of doing the right thing, even when it seems like no one is watching. If her story moved you, share this video with someone who believes in the power of kindness. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that show how even the smallest acts can change everything.